Hello and welcome to Season 4, Episode 22 of Logicast, the AWS News Podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Carl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, by my colleague and DIY expert, John Goodall. And I forget his job title is Lead Cloud Engineer. I have to put that in there because if I don't put that in the introduction, he always pulls me up on it. So how are you doing today, John?
Oh, I pull you up on it because you put your job title in there, so it seems fair to me.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's just, I'm just introducing myself, but I have to try and say something different about you every week, which is challenging.
Challenge. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Didn't do any DIY at the weekend, which is nice, which is a nice change. Although I did deliver a chair. I don't know if that counts. Well, no, I don't know if it counts as DIY or not. I had to take the handrail off to get the chair out of my house to put it in someone else's. So I don't know if that counts.
So there's a little bit of disassembly, reassembly. Yeah, I replaced a broken fridge drawer. So that was about the limit of my DIY this weekend. Not particularly technical, but
Looking forward to Wednesday, I must say. Looking forward to Wednesday.
Why? What's on Wednesday?
I get to go and wax lyrical again in front of people that are being bribed to be there with alcohol and pizza.
I thought you were still talking about DIY. You're actually now talking about AWS and AWS community and speaking to the AWS community. Yeah. And speaking of AWS community, we are joined today by a very special guest, Mohit Saxena. How are you doing today, Mohit?
I'm doing good. Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Great to have you on. So you are a fellow AWS community builder. Tell us what sort of things that you do for the AWS community, Mohit, to get into the program, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm in the serverless category. So I've been creating content around AWS, like cloud tutorials for some years now. And I've been like active open source contributor as well. So yeah, that's how I got into the program. And ever since that, I've been like following news and, trying to contribute as much as I can towards the community.
Cool. Is it your first year in the program or are you multi-years in?
Yeah, it's the first year actually.
Cool. Well, welcome to the program. So what do you do for a living when you're not doing community work?
I'm actually a DevOps engineer. Yeah.
Are you a freelancer or you work for an organization? Or?
Yeah, I work for an organization called Uniper. So we are in the energy domain, working in like majorly for the European markets. Yeah, so I basically handle their cloud infrastructure and like infrastructure and like automation and DevOps practices.
Lots of serverless, or is that just your own kind of side interest?
Lots of serverless, actually. Yeah.
Excellent. Great.
It's the best category. It is the best category. I'm serverless too.
Yeah, cloud operations is the best category. Obviously, it's we're generalists rather than specialists. So yeah, a little bit about everything and not a lot about anything.
It doesn't preclude you from talking about other things. To be completely clear, it doesn't preclude you about talking about other things. One of the things that now I don't know what he is, community hero, I think, Stephen Sennett, who's been on pod before and will be on in a couple of weeks' time again, said he was content delivery and networking, I think, as a CV, and he's a community hero now, I think. But he said that on his LinkedIn that, just because that's your category, you don't have to talk about only that. That's just kind of the thing that you're most interested in. I mean, when it comes to renewal time, I do try to have at least one serverless thing in my renewal every time round, but then I like to talk about it anyway.
Curious, actually. I'm not sure this has ever come up when we're talking about the AWS Community Builder program, but I wonder if you can actually switch categories by changing what you write about. Do people do that?
You have to. I don't know if the word is apply or just ask Jason very nicely, but yeah, you can change.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not. There must have been some people who've done that, but I'm not aware of any off the top of my head. Anyway, we are not here to talk about the AWS Community Builder program, despite the fact that we are all AWS community builders. We are here to talk about AWS news. So, as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup newsletter, and then John picks a selection of the articles from the newsletter that we'd like to talk about with our guests. So, we do, of course, have such a selection of articles to discuss discuss with John and Mohit this week. And the first of those, which you may have seen, is the announcement that Aurora DSQL is now generally available. So Aurora DSQL was one of the most popular announcements from reInvent 2024 back in December when it was announced into preview. And last week on the 27th of May, it finally went into general availability. So, John, Aurora DSQL, I'm sure we've discussed it before, but what are your thoughts now that it's gone into general availability?
I just have this brilliant image in my head of Werner Vogel's punching physics in the face with this one, because functionally they've argued with physics and won. And I don't understand how, because for the uninitiated, what rock have you been hiding under? Because this has been quite noisy, this one. But for the uninitiated, one of the key problems of the past kind of 20 years or so has been distributed time. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is you have a time server somewhere, and if you're on a distributed architecture, everything at the database layer has to agree on what the time is, or high volume stuff can get really kind of out of sync and transactions can go wrong, and it's just a bad time for everybody. And historically that's been solved by dealing with local time and just kind of rationalizing things and doing local versions of read writes. And again, it's a complete pain in the bum. And again, at reInvent, I can't remember which keynote it was. It might have been Werner's. It might have been, I think it was Werner's. One of the chaps from Too Good to Go, which if you're not familiar, they do food waste and that kind of thing. You know, restaurants can say, I've got all this left over. There you go. They got up on stage and spoke about how they've been dealing with big distributed architectures and central write stores and all this kind of thing. And they were doing it in this really brilliantly engineered way, but it wasn't using a relational database. And then Werner comes back on stage afterwards and says, with DSQL, you don't need any of that. You could just, I mean, the guy, fair play, he's been on stage at reInvent. He's running a really successful business around this architecture. But I think the poor guy must have just been dying inside because it's all of this that I've built and I don't need it now. But right. Yes, DSQL solves for distributed time effectively. What is it? It is Aurora, which is just managed RDS database. I believe I don't know if it's for both Postgres and for MySQL to start with. For DSQL, I don't know offhand, but Aurora is Postgres and MySQL compatible. And what it's doing is it's giving you a globally distributed database service and solution that has, I think it's millisecond time that's just, it agrees globally, right? It agrees to the millisecond, and then they give you down to a few microseconds of like a bandwidth either side, for lack of a better term, like a header and footer of, well, we think it's to this, to like 5 decimals, but then it could be, if you need to go further than that, it could be within this kind of boundary. And they've done that through making a third backbone in the AWS network, which is no mean feat in and of its own right, and atomic clocks and satellites, and just the engineering behind this is just phenomenal. It's really, they've argued with physics and won. It's the only way I can put it across, because the biggest problem has always been the speed of light, and they've made that not a problem anymore. So that's amazing. That's amazing. It's been kicking around now for 6 months in GA. Now it's gone in preview. Now it's gone GA, which does mean you have to pay for it, I'm afraid. So that's the only bad thing, is now you have to pay for it. But that was always going to happen.
I'm pretty sure it's only Postgres right now, from the quick search I've made. But what are your thoughts on this, Mohit? Are you as excited about it as John is?
Yeah, definitely. And like when you talk about time series databases, right? So it always looked like a huge monster, right? That you have to deal with. And yeah, it's a very painful to like work on it and debug it, right? So if something like this comes up, yeah, definitely looking forward to it.
Cool.
The big thing here as well is active distributed architectures are hard work. They've always been hard work, right? They've been getting better with Dynamo Global Tables and Aurora Global Database. But now with DSQL, you can have an active distributed architecture within a single region of 4 nines of availability. That's 99.99, and 5 nines in multi-region, which is wow, with no single point of failure. Yes, okay, this is more expensive than regular Aurora, so you don't necessarily need, if you don't need an active setup, which You probably don't. Let's be honest here. Most people don't need active-active. You need something a bit less expensive for your DR strategy. But if you do need active-active for either DR or for serving multiple regions, just use DSQL. Work out how to work with Postgres and use DSQL.
I do like the sound of the synchronized time in any location. Is there a way that I can leverage this to get my family synchronized on time with me? Because I always seem to be several minutes, if not hours, ahead of them on most things.
Well, you know what Alan Shearer said, don't you? And I believe this as well. And I picked this up from martial arts when I was a kid. But is to be early is to be on time. To be on time is to be late. And if you're late, don't bother.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we can leverage it. Maybe we can build some apps to help with that problem.
Social engineering.
Yeah. Anyway, Aurora DSQL, everybody loves it. Great to see it finally go into GA. Let's move on to our second article for this week, which is a feature announcement around Amazon Elastic Container Service. The ECS exit reason message has increased from 255 to 1,024 characters. So, Mohit, I know this is an area that was of interest. Oh, Mohit's dropped.
Keep going. I can talk about it.
Yeah. Which is, oh, no, Mohit's back again. I think we lost you there for a moment, Mohit. Hopefully the feed will settle down a little bit. But let's go to John while Mohit's connection restores itself on the ECS container exit reason message.
Yeah, so this is quite interesting. This is useful. This is incredibly useful because one of the things that was historically painful with working with ECS was if you had a container that wouldn't start, right, for one reason or another, you had to work quite hard to work out what that was. And in some cases, it was pretty easy because, I had no permissions or my shim is failing immediately or whatever. But the message tended to be truncated. It was quite short. It was painful to deal with. And now it's gone from, 200 and something characters to 1,024. So you can have a much larger exit reason message, which makes debugging these things significantly easier, right? Because 255 characters is not a lot. 1,024 is 4 times as many and gives you just the space to see what you're trying to solve. And we're doing this, for customers fairly regularly now because we do quite a lot of containerization under the modernization pathway. And that's really handy because debugging ECS fail to start can really suck. And this makes your life a lot less horrible.
Sounds good. We're still struggling a little bit with Mohit's feed, I think. I know that he did have some things to say about this particular article, but he's not made it back into the feed yet.
So the only other thing to say, I guess, from my side on this is, as it says kind of in the feature announcement, is you can access it both through the management console, which is probably where you are if we're trying to get something to come up and to run, because you can see the logs in there and you can kind of see them starting and stopping and failing and all the rest of it. And it is in the described tasks API. So if you have any kind of third-party tooling that you're using, I don't know if SAM plays nicely with this with like a sync command, it might do, then you can feed it through into the into the CLI as well. So it's available in a couple of places, which is handy.
Sounds good. Okay, we seem to have still lost Mohit, so let's plow on without him, and if he manages to rejoin, we'll ask him his opinion on the next article. So the next article we had to talk about this week is an article from Fayez on dev.To. Fayez, of course, is an AWS hero and trained me on my sysops admin. I had that particular certification. She was the cloud guru that I listened to for several hours to pass that particular certification. But
did she mistake you for someone else at reInvent?
Told me that she loved my training courses. So I'm not sure who she thought I was. I'm not having created a training course. Unless I did one by accident and it's somehow out there in the wild. So or somebody pretending to be me. She mistook me for
AI Carl doing training.
I'm just going to try and bring Mohit back in. His video disappeared again. Let's just carry on with this article, which is on dev.To. And this is an article all about how you can create architecture diagrams in seconds with the Amazon Q developer CLI agent. So we all love a picture. Pictures speak 1,000 words, as they say. So I love a picture, particularly if it's got the correct generation AWS service icons in, because some tools have the older generation icons kicking around in them. As I've mentioned several times on the podcast, that is a little pet hate of mine. So let's hope that this particular tool uses the latest generation icon repository. But John, I know you thought this one was pretty cool when you saw the come out last week. So
well, that's exactly why I picked this article, was because I know that the wrong icon set annoys you. So I thought, oh, diagrams. So I know that gets on your nerves.
You can have a rant about that again, yeah.
Okay, so what this is doing, and for context, Faye Ellis is currently an AWS hero, was a community builder very briefly, and previously worked at a Cloud Guru. I think she now works at Pluralsight. Generally knows her stuff. Really, really clever, right? Knows her stuff. This is really cool. I've gone from, let's talk about AI for just a briefest of moments. I've gone from being very bearish about AI to being quite bullish about it, right? I've gone the full gamut from I hate this, I don't need it, I don't understand this, to this is the best thing since sliced bread. But for the listeners' benefit, I don't eat a huge amount of bread, so I don't know how good that is, because I can't stand the carbs. I don't need the carbs. Moving on.
But do you slice your own bread when you do?
Admittedly not. No, admittedly not. If I'm honest, I don't eat. I tend to eat wraps more than bread, and you don't really slice a wrap, do you?
No.
No, you sort of.
Well, you might slice it in half once you've wrapped it to make it a bit more manageable.
What is quite a good thing to do is if you put a little cut through. I'm going completely on a weight loss tangent here. But if you put like a little sort of slit through it, if you like, you kind of cut into the middle from one side, then you can fold it into 3 really well, and that's great if you're putting like meats and eggs and that kind of thing in them, because it contains the whole thing. You don't get all the drippage.
There we go. Yeah, bread origami.
There's the title. But yes, what this is doing, back on message, what this is doing is you install Amazon Q developer CLI agent, which is a bit, it's a bit of a mouthful, right? And you do have to auth with Q login, and you can auth with your builder ID if you have a builder ID. And any community folks listening, you should have a builder ID by now, or Jason will come and, I don't know, steal all of your shoes or something, because everybody needs a builder ID to go through renewal. So everybody listening that's in the community should already have a builder ID, and you need it for this whole new profile thing, the rest of it. But that's you absolutely need a builder ID. Once you've authed with your builder ID, or you can auth with your company's SSO setup, then you can start using this, right? And what can you do? Well, you can give it a YAML template from CloudFormation. Here's what it is. And the example, just, here's a GitHub gist of it. There you go. And it can spit out a mermaid diagram. If you haven't used mermaid diagrams before, Faye describes it as JavaScript based. I'm sure it is built in JavaScript, but I never sort of viewed the syntax as JavaScript like, and maybe that's because I don't write a lot of JavaScript. But it's just lots of, thing pointing to thing, lots of greater than, less than signs just acting as arrows, right? And you sort of say, this points to this is annotated like that, and you get this nice looking diagram. And Q Developer managed to spit it out, and then you just pop the code into a Mermaid Live editor, which works really nicely, and I highly recommend you go and use that if ever you need to make a mermaid diagram. And the result looks really good. But mermaid diagrams are good for kind of dev stuff. They're good for flowcharts and those kinds of things. But if you want to please somebody like my great and powerful overlord, then you do need to put it in the proper notation. You do need to use the proper architecture diagrams. And it can do that as well with draw.io. Formerly, I forget what it used to be called. It used to be called something else, but diagrams.net it used to be. Now it's draw.io, I think. Or it used to be called draw.io, and now it's called diagrams.net. But one or the other, I forget. But it goes, okay, cool. Here's the diagram. Here's what it looks like. Here's the service icons. I don't know that it's necessarily going to use the correct icon set, because draw.io does have an outdated icon pack that baked into it, and it will probably just use the one that it's got, which is part of why, because as a company, we officially use draw.io because it's really good and it's free. Great. I paid for my own Lucid chart membership because it wasn't horribly expensive, and it stops me having these conversations around, well, here's the icon pack, because I'm too lazy to do that, so I'll just pay £80 a year for the tool and deal with it that way. But this is really, really good, just generally for making diagrams and what have you. I don't know if it can go the other way and feed a diagram in and give you the code on the outside. Maybe it can, but I don't know how much I trust that. Certainly without a review. But for someone that does a lot of trying to understand other people's code, that's really, really powerful, because it's, well, here's our stack. Meh. Okay, cool. I'll chuck that into Q and Q can spit out a picture for me. And then it's a lot easier to try to kind of visualize how things hang together. It's not the only tool that does this. Admittedly, there's plenty of other ways of doing it, but it's a really nice usage of Q. And if you're already using it, or if you're not, and you want to kind of play with it and see what it does and see how it works, it's a good thing to go and use. Go try it.
Cool. Mohit, I'm not sure if we've got you. You've been dropping in and out of the feed, so we can't see you at the moment, but maybe we can hear you. I guess that answers that question. Let's, and Mohit's dropped from the feed again. So let's move on to our next article for this week, which is, well, actually, we've got a pair of articles that we're going to talk about roughly at the same time, all around cost. So there are a couple of announcements around cost last week. The first one around Cost Explorer, the second one around Cost Optimization Hub. So the Cost Explorer announcement was that Cost Explorer now offers a new cost comparison feature. And I must admit, when I read this, I thought you could do this already. So what's new about this one? Did you get the nuance of what's new about this particular feature, John?
I mean, you can kind of do it already, sort of, but it wasn't like a direct overlay feature, is how I'm reading this. So up until the 29th of May, you wanted to look at costs from 1 month to the next. You did a span of 2 months, and you just kind of looked at the graph left to right. I realize I've done that my left to right, and because I'm mirrored, it's right to left. But you do it left to right, and you'd sort of see that the lines have gone up and they'd gone down. You'd be kind of doing the mental maths as you like, and kind of lining them up visually, right? What this is doing is it's allowing you to overlay, as I understand it, month 1 to month 2. I'm not going to use particular months because people will get angry at me if I start, using particular months. But month 1 to month 2, and you can overlay them, and that's really handy if what you're trying to do is you're trying to see not necessarily big swings, but they do talk about that. But say a trend change where you've gone from month 1 to month 2 to month 3 or whatever, and your costs have gone up, not a lot, but enough that you want to go and look at it, or your costs have stayed pretty flat, so your normal budget alerts haven't triggered, but you're going through, say, a modernization program, and you'd like to try and work out why your spend hasn't dropped like you thought it would, and then you can sort of see where the breakdown of the spend is going. So you can kind of see it's we're taking spend out of EC2, but we put a commensurate amount of spend back into EC2 because we're using EC2 for an ECS backend, and we didn't think that was going to happen. Or Fargate has proved to be significantly less cost effective than we thought it was going to be, and the spend is just kind of doing that, and that's really useful. That's really, really useful. It's available at no cost, which is great, because Cost Explorer, by and large, is no cost anyway. The cost management, by and large, is no cost. There's a couple of fees for using some of the APIs. But if you're doing stuff in the console, which I would imagine most folks are when looking at cost, because the graphing is second to none, you're not going to pay for this, which is great. And the other cool thing is there's another widget on the homepage for cost management showing the top 10 cost variations in the previous 2 months, which is also
So I was going to comment on that if you didn't raise it, actually, because that sounds great, because usually it's kind of staring at graphs and thinking, well, which, highlighting one that where the bar has got bigger from 1 month to the next, and figuring out which one it is. You no longer have to kind of do that manually now. You can just have a quick glance at the widget to start drilling into those cost change trends. So that's great.
I've got a brilliant image of you sitting there with an abacus just going.
I still have one of these.
This is where we show our age, or I show your age and I show my schooling, as it were, in British comedic history. And I mentioned the Crimson Permanent Assurance sketch from Monty Python.
Yes, I remember that. Definitely remember that.
That's brilliant.
But I still like using a calculator.
You need them when you're trawling the high accountancies.
Absolutely. Anyway, let's move on to the second part of this discussion. Well, actually, all the articles we've got to talk about all kind of bleed together, really. But the second announcement that we saw last week was that Cost Optimization Hub now supports savings plans and reservations preferences. Again, what's new here, John?
Well, this is new and not new at the same time, as it were. Okay, so let's do some definitions in the way that I haven't had to do for a little while, because I think I've defined about half of the AWS ecosystem at this point. But let's do some definitions. So Cost Optimization Hub is sort of an extension of Cost Explorer. It's in the same sort of family, but it's kind of saying, here's all the data that I can see that tells me how I can save money, where I can save money, how I'm going to go about doing that, kind of, how much it is and where the money is to be saved, right? And that breaks down between things like Move to Graviton, which does save you a bit of money, reserved instances, reserved nodes, which is slightly different because nodes are for things like Elasticache and instances are for things like EC2 and RDS, and then savings plans as well, which splits out between compute and EC2 again and SageMaker. Right? For those particular committed purchase agreements, which is what they technically are, because for either reserved nodes, instances, or savings plans, you say, I'm going to give you X amount of money, which looks like this within the service, for Y amount of time with Z amount of money up front. And as a result of that, AWS will give you a percentage discount, wherein the more money you give them up front and the longer you agree to pay them for, the more money they give you back effectively, right? Because I assume that looks good on their balance sheets because they just have some guaranteed income for a while. And because they have guaranteed income for a while, they can, I assume it also helps them with their capacity forecasts and things, because we like to think of the cloud as this big, infinite, nebulous mush of there's just capacity forever and I don't have to think about it. And that's true. You don't. Amazon still do. And I assume that's why they like longer term commitments, because they can kind of see, well, we've definitely got this much that's going to be at least being paid for, regardless of if it's used, but it is at least committed there for the next X period of time. So that's presumably why they like them. However, if you wanted to look at the various options for your committed purchases, the default recommendation that comes out is to save you the most amount of money, which kind of makes sense. But that's 3 years and paying for all of it up front. And that, depending on what you're reserving, can be a lot of money. I've seen, 3-year all up fronts for getting on for 100,000, right? It's a lot of money. And yes, the discount percentage is quite good compared with 1 year and no upfront. But lots of businesses, particularly the ones that we interact with, aren't that cash rich, certainly in the SMB space, right? Enterprises might be a bit more cash rich and they might have something to spend it on. But again, I don't imagine they like doing that either, because what you're doing is effectively saying, this money, Amazon can look after it for me. Thank you very much. And you no longer have that to invest in your own projects and do your own R&D and all the rest of it. What this is doing is you can now say in Cost Optimization Hub, my preference is for X upfront over Y term. Brilliant. So you can sort of say my preference is always going to be no upfront and 1 year, because I value holding my cash, or I need the cash on my balance sheet for one reason or another, or for whatever reason that makes sense to you. You can tell Cost Optimization Hub, stop telling me about 3-year all upfront. I'm not going to buy that. What I am going to buy is 1 year no upfront or 1 year partial upfront. And to be honest, that's the most common type that we see. And okay, my sample size and my sample data is from SMBs, which that kind of makes sense to me. But even when I was in big finance firms and stuff, it was the same kind of logic, because it had to come out of a budget pot somewhere. And whilst the company had loads of money, the team didn't necessarily have access to it. So shorter term reservations and smaller amounts of money up front tend to be preferred. So what I think is going to happen is lots and lots of people are going to go in once they work out they can do this and say, stop telling me about 3-year all up fronts. I don't want that. What I want is shorter commits.
I'm absolutely going to do that, because I don't know of any Logicata client that's ever done a 3-year all upfront payment. As you said, some
I
will
know
do
some 3-year
all
no
upfront.
upfronts.
Yeah, I've never seen a customer do a 36-month all upfront. I've seen 12-month or 3-year 6-month. 1 year 6 months upfront.
Yeah.
And 3-year no upfront. But I've never seen a customer do a 3-year all upfront. So it'll be a much more realistic to give them recommendations that align with their preferences, because the savings can be kind of over-egged, and they don't look quite as attractive when you put in the payment terms that the customer will actually accept. So this is a nice feature. I like this. And what I also like is another article I shared this morning, which will be on next week's newsletter, is that you can actually apply these things in the AWS pricing calculator now, which in the past you could only generate estimates for on demand. And if you wanted to work out what it might look like on a reserved basis, you had to do that manually. Now, apparently, I haven't tried it yet, but according to the article that I read and shared this morning, they've built that functionality into the AWS pricing calculator.
Hooray.
So, when we're working those estimates out for customers, we'll be able to show them what it looks like with reserved instances or compute savings plans, which is fantastic.
The only other thing to say about this, and it's not particularly about this announcement, it's about Cost Optimization Hub more generally. You are plumb out of luck if you are using China or GovCloud. Sorry.
It's not available yet there. Well, that'll be an announcement in the future that this is now available in GovCloud, because we do see.
Well, nobody in GovCloud needs to save any money.
Yeah, well, no, they all need to spend it before the end of the financial year, so that they don't lose their budget.
To be fair, AWS actively tell you don't use GovCloud unless you have to, because it is a poor cousin region. Don't use it unless you have to.
And China, I believe, is still operated by third parties,
yes,
not directed by Amazon. So anyway, so let's move on to our final article for this week, which, on reflection, I think probably should have came before the two articles that we discussed. But it's an article on the Register, and the title is "Unhappy with Cloud Costs? You're Not Alone, and It's All Your Fault." So the great
I love
Register
the Register
headline.
I love LReg. It's great.
Yeah. Great headline and subheadline. So this article is all about a survey that Gartner put out there, all about growing dissatisfaction over cloud computing costs. I think it perhaps logically might have gone before the cost saving measures that we've just talked about. What are your thoughts on this, John?
I mean, LReg, nail on the head again. Like, it's the whole article in 2 lines. It's, you're not alone, but you did it wrong.
Yeah.
It is what it is. This ties into the cloud repatriation conversation that comes around every so often as well, because the only reason people repatriate is because it's too expensive to run that particular workload in the cloud. And what we've seen, Corey Quinn said this in his recent newsletter, and I don't know if Corey listens to this, but if you do, hi, Corey. Got to do it. Got to fangirl over Corey a little bit. I'm not allowed to say that, am I? Fanboy, hyper fan. I don't
fan them.
Just generally, I don't know. Yeah, it's one of those when money could be available cheaply, and I hadn't considered this until I read the newsletter, but he hit the nail on the head with this one. When money was available cheaply, what do I mean by that? When you could get loans at an interest rate of less than 1%. Right, when the interest rates were in the toilet, money was available cheaply. You just chucked everything in the cloud, and the fact that your cost went up a little bit was just the cost of doing business, and it didn't matter because you could get money cheaply, and it was sort of the cost of doing innovation and just sort of moving forward. But everybody did it, and not everybody necessarily should have. And I think the people that are complaining about it are those sorts of people, right? That they moved their 24/7 on workload to the cloud, that they knew and understood and could operate in their own data centers or in their colo facilities very, very effectively, because it only needed a standard size server, and it was well understood. And they chucked it in the cloud because, well, that's what everybody's doing, and that's the wrong way to do business. Realistically, it's not everyone is going to the cloud, so let's go to the cloud. No, that workload didn't necessarily make sense. And I think lots of what we're seeing with this complaining is that, and the article says sort of to the same thing there, right? It does talk about vendor lock-in and stuff as well, which I don't buy. I view vendor lock-in as a feature rather than a bug. But if you are concerned about that sort of thing, then yeah, by all means, continue to run your own VMs on VMware in your own data center. Don't use the cloud because you're doing it wrong.
But if you are running your own VMs on VMware, the price may have just hiked rather significantly, given what's going on in that part of the industry right now. But I think a lot of what's happened here is, businesses have taken incentives from cloud providers to migrate everything to the cloud. But the migration was always supposed to be the start of a journey of modernizing those workloads to be more cloud native. And that's where the real savings start to come in. But of course, there's a lot of investment required to do that modernization. And if you are unable to make said investment, then you're never going to realize those savings of moving to a more cloud native architecture. So I think a lot of people have just chucked everything in there and gone, oh, the credits have run out, the incentives have run out, and now this is really expensive, because they haven't actually gone on the journey. They've just done step one. So 37 Signals, of course, is the poster child world for cloud
Because
repatriation.
it's the only one that
Mentioned,
did it. It's
It's
the only one that did it.
major one, yeah. They keep shouting about it on a regular basis, yeah. So, but I mean, it does. This does seem to the survey does seem to indicate that they're not the only ones who are unhappy. So,
Yeah, but you are not 37 Signals. You are not Dropbox, who have also done the same thing. But Dropbox have, one very well-defined workload. So the cloud was always wrong for them because they need huge amounts of storage. The counterpoint to this that I always love to tout is Zynga, which, if you're not familiar, they do like mobile games and stuff. They moved to the cloud under this whole, okay, we're running the cloud. And then they moved out of the cloud again, thinking it was going to be far too expensive because of like IoT or something like that. And then they realized that they couldn't actually run their own data centers properly. So they went back to the cloud again. And they're a poster child for not repatriated, on-prem expatriation. I don't know cloud expatriation. I don't know what the term is. They left and they went in and then left and then came back again. They're the poster child for that AWS loves to trot out every so often. So this is one of those things that people have jumped into the cloud, as you say, because there was loads of money for doing it, and the money has run out and they've gone, oh, maybe we shouldn't have done that. The firms that did their due diligence in the first place and went, let's actually analyze these workloads and go, well, that one doesn't need to go in the cloud. That one does need to go in the cloud. That's high performance compute. And we actually have a data center full of GPUs already. So we'll just continue to use them. That did all the work up front, did it properly. You don't hear from them because they just did it.
Yeah, I think it applies more to certainly if it's Gartner, it'll be enterprise customers responding to this particular survey. I think it's less of a trend in the SMB space because I guess in SMB land, they don't have the data centers in which to run these workloads, and they don't have access to the technology that working with a public cloud provider gives them.
No, and certainly the customers that we're dealing with at the SMB space, we're competing against, or rather they are using, I should say, I call them black box, but that's maybe not the right term. Like these commercial will host WordPress for you type people, or you can have a VPS host is another one that you can have, and server, OVH Cloud being one. Who's the German one? Hetzner. Yeah, VPS providers, and they're not playing in the same sort of field. They're not doing the same kind of thing, so it's not a fair comparison.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said the hyperscalers are not cheap places to run VMs. If all you want to do is run VMs, there are cheaper places to run VMs. But you really need to be leveraging some of the other cloud native services that are on offer that you won't be getting from a VPS provider. So some of the managed services, some of the data services, data analytics, some of the AI tools, and so on and so forth. That's where the real value of working with a hyperscaler comes. If it's just a case of dump your VMs in there and hope it's going to be cheaper, it probably won't be.
I did the maths a little while ago now, and I don't know how accurate it is, but I worked out that it was something like 25% more expensive to just use the cloud as a VM broker. Because they're going to make money too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for season 4, episode 22 of Logicast. Unfortunately, we lost our guest, Mohit, partway through. I guess connectivity was not great for him today. Obviously, we'll still credit him because we did get to hear from him at the beginning of the episode, but he has not managed to rejoin for the end of the episode. So just remains for me to thank you, John, as always, for your insights. And thank you, Mohit, for your insights at the beginning of the episode when connectivity allowed. So that is the end of season 4, episode 22 of Logicast. If you've enjoyed it, tell your friends. We are available to download wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to see Mohit dropping in and out of the feed, you can watch that on YouTube, where we're also available. Please do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be back next week with another episode of Logicast for you. Until then, thanks for listening. See you again next time.